Well, welcome to the No Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
I'm Tim Wade.
And my name is Joe Augustin, and we're back for a third season, a third year. My goodness, how many of you thought that this was going to happen?
Not me.
I was hoping.
Well, it's a show that we've kind of put out here to try and help people along. I wrote in my own sharing about it. It's like sort of a show that may help you as a viewer on your personal mission to make the world a better place. It's one of the resources we hope that can help you in that respect.
Yeah, and I've been speaking to a lot of friends who say that they're so overwhelmed by everything that's going on in the world that by being able to check into the show, they can just sort of get a really quick update of all the important stuff going on because there's so much noise, right? So yeah, and that's good. That's positive feedback. If we can achieve that, I'm happy.
Yeah. So we haven't seen each other for a while. Shall we get a quick update from everybody before we start the show?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Okay. So you've been on the road, Andrea. It looks like it.
Yeah, we did a bit of a road trip in Thailand. I don't feel that I can fly like I used to without looking like an absolute hypocrite. So, and obviously after Steve's operation, we've got to be a little bit more cautious. So we decided to do a road trip from Phuket to Bangkok and back. And it was absolutely fantastic. It was, when you live in a country, you don't often spend the time seeing the country. I don't know if you guys feel the same when you've lived in other countries. There's so many things I should have done from Boston that I didn't do when I lived there. So it was good. It was really good. And just seeing different parts of Thailand, different levels of energy in the towns, non-tourist places, tourist places, that it's a very diverse place. One of the things that really, I suppose, horrified me is the drive. I could really see for the first time how extensive palm oil plantations are here. I remember driving from Singapore to KL for the first time and seeing the palm oil plantations, which were just everywhere. And we all know how destructive they are. Right up into the high mountains, you could see these palm oil plantations, as well as obviously the rubber plantations. And I'm pretty concerned about how widespread that all is. And then, of course, the other side is we've seen all the extreme weather that's been going on. And we've been talking about it for a long time. You guys know I'm paying attention to it, and it doesn't feel good seeing what you've been saying come to light. It doesn't feel good at all. But knowing it's also going to get worse. But the other thing that I've noticed is a real sort of split in attention. So the Northern Hemisphere, we know everything that's going on over there. But what's coming, Australia will get a lot of media attention, global attention, but I think what's coming for the rest of the global south, we will never get the equal amount of media attention that the rest of the world gets. And I think when the next heat season hits, we're going to be in real trouble in this part of the world. Not in Singapore. You guys should be all right. But the people living in tin shacks.
I went on my own road trip in Singapore. I went to one mall and I saw the whole country.
I walked out of the house 5 minutes, boiled to death, and came back in.
Yeah. Is it still as moist as it was when we were there? And I was there visiting you guys in May.
Moist.
It was horrible.
Well, not quite as rainy. It's the rainy season seems to have passed us by, but it's still a warm, muggy walk on the outside. So today is presidential election day. I know people have been counting some of their steps, or counting the walk to the voting booth as part of their steps today.
Right. Oh yeah,
when
Singapore
the breeze
election
comes through here, it's amazing. Just put it that way. Yeah. I mean, any tropical island.
Yeah,
Phuket would be the same. Like when it's in the doldrums, no good. But when that sea breeze comes through, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. Tim, you did a bit of traveling as well, right? Since the last show.
Did I?
I thought
you traveled before.
Went off on a holiday
before we finished.
Yeah. All right. Where did I go? I can't remember. I need another holiday, so I'm going tomorrow. Yeah. All right. Let's get into the headlines.
But Joe, what have you been doing?
Oh yeah, we didn't do any
catching up. Remember?
I guess you guys were. We broke after I had that eye operation, right? I think we all settled down. So now I have an interesting kind of situation with my eye where my vision without glasses is sort of improved in some circumstances. So I can actually walk around and function without glasses now because I have a myopic left eye which lets me read stuff, and my right eye lets me see far away stuff. But when I'm online like this, I need glasses to see the screen, so it's sort of in between. But that's with it. Very quiet time for me. I'm the most boring person in the world. I was thinking about what I'd done in the meantime, and the answer truly was not much.
And to which we respond, aye. Tim?
Oh, no.
Are you back studying?
I am indeed. I'm in a false sense of security at the moment because most of my assignments are after the mid-semester break. The mid-semester break is now. So I got 2 weeks off, in inverted commas, with assignments about to be due, a lot of them. So, so I've been just like, hey, this is so much better than last semester, but it's about not to be. But I'm still happily sort of sailing down an Egyptian river in denial.
Yeah.
But other than that, all good. Yeah, no, it's been really interesting. It's been nice. I like it. It's good fun.
Yeah.
Well, if you'll let me take a swing at it, I'd like to open up the show because I've been catching up with House recently. So I'm on season 3 right now of House, or season 4. I can't remember now which one it is. And so this first story that you've got lined up for us, Andrea, is right in the midst of Houseville. It's a very House-like storyline. Tell us about this.
All right. So the heading is A Worm in the Brain. So a personal story before I share it. I was coming back from the doctor's with one of my sons who had a staph infection on his face. And that's a bit of a regular occurrence here. Apparently, people, basically Caucasian people, suffer staph infections a lot in Thailand. And as I was watching that being lanced on his face, I had this sick feeling in my stomach, only to open up the BBC to discover that this lady in Australia has been through the world first when an 8 centimetre or 3-inch worm has been found alive in her brain. She's 64 years old and for months suffered from symptoms like stomach pain, a cough, night sweats, which also evolved into forgetfulness and depression. And the Australian medical team, which was led by this lady, the neurosurgeon Dr. Bandy, are now world famous with this first. So according to the doctors, even if you take away the yuck factor, this is a new infection never documented before in a human being. It's suspected that the woman became an accidental host after using the forage plants contaminated by python feces and parasite eggs for cooking. But anyway, 30 new types of infections have appeared in the last 30 years. 3/4 are zoonotic, which is when infectious diseases have jumped from animals to humans. And it's all about the fact that we're sort of more and more encroaching into nature, and that's the cost that we pay.
COVID was one of them, right?
Exactly, right?
Yeah. This was kind of weird. So going out and getting fresh veggies from the field, where the pythons, because the worms often in pythons, and so they're shedding their skin. The worms get on the grass. It may not be the feces, it may just be from the skin shed too, and then taking it in and making a nice salad and ending up with a worm in your brain.
Yeah, maybe cook it.
Kind of, yeah, I know, but it's kind of gross.
It's so gross.
How does it get there?
Well, one of the things that people tend to miss out on stuff like this is you look at the article, you listen, and you go like, it's the first time it's being, and then the key word in there is documented. It doesn't mean that diseases like these don't happen. They've happened all the time. But now you just got one of these stories, that's been set out. They figured out exactly what happened. It's a great investigation in terms of medical science. But it's probably not the first time it's happened.
Yeah, I would say so, because when I was reading the article, it was saying, as humans get, impinge a little bit more on nature, natural boundaries, and starting to be closer into nature. And I was like, hang on a minute, isn't that where we started? So I would agree with Joe that it's probably been around for a while. They just couldn't get in and have a look. They didn't have the technology to do it. The person would just eventually die.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Or go mad.
Or turn into a cobra.
But a story that started to emerge yesterday that started to get the headlines was, of course, the fire in Johannesburg. Yeah. And it's a devastating story. So basically there was a fire in a decrepit building in the inner city area of Johannesburg. The last reports that I've seen put the death toll at 74. The fact that there weren't an increase in numbers overnight tells me hopefully maybe it's not too many more. But it's a truly tragic situation. So the people living in the building are all undocumented migrants who have come into South Africa from surrounding African countries, typically. And it's really put the issue out there, because this isn't the first fire that these buildings, because they're all over the city centre, and they're run by a mafia, and it's a terrible situation, right? But undocumented migrants are everywhere, and I've met some of the undocumented community around where I am, and it's a terrible existence for people because you have absolutely no rights. You can't get medical attention unless you've got money. The children can't be educated. They live in these decrepit camps where they've got, no ability to live well. The children are at risk, whether it's diseases or, they can't get basic injections when babies are born. So it's a terrible situation. And, even in countries like Australia, we have refugees. They're not undocumented migrants because, of course, Australia wouldn't have them because they keep them all on other islands outside of the country. But there are more and more migrants and undocumented migrants and refugees spilling out around the world. And we are not being proactive in getting prepared for this. And we need to. And I think any one of us living anywhere in this world after this summer must realise that any one of us could be on that list of people on the run, on the move. So I don't know. I'm happy that the spotlight's been put onto the issue for Johannesburg and South Africa. They need to do something. I mean, these people don't even have toilets or running water in these buildings. It's a terrible way for them to live. But we need to start looking at how do we take care of these people, but we need to be doing it in advance of the need. And they're talking millions, billions of refugees on the move. So we're not ready for this at all. We're not even thinking about it. Our governments aren't thinking about it. They're turning the people into the enemy when they're just basically young families, often women and children, just trying to survive. But how did you guys take that news? I thought it was very sad.
Well, again, I'll just be honest and say that this show is where I pick up most of the news, and I honestly hadn't heard about this story until I read it, in the prep for the show. So, but the whole idea of people just are where they are. I mean, you think about the global picture, right? There are a lot of people just are everywhere, and they are just where they are. People talk about why don't you just move, get out of your situation, and it's not really as simple as that. You don't have the resources, and if you want to leave where you are, how do you get to where you want to be? Especially if you have no status as far as immigration or anything else is concerned.
Yeah, and it's growing, right?
Yeah, I think what happens is these communities are there and they've always been there, and now we are hearing more about them. When you have this whole abandoned buildings where people just make a home, it's just very likely in poorer countries especially that you don't bother to go ahead and do anything about that, right? If you look at numbers, you'll find things like mobile phone usage, for instance, is usually much higher than a documented population. And then you go something about that doesn't quite work until you realize, there's a whole bunch of people who just have these throwaway phones or burner lines or whatever it is because that's their lifestyle, and they're not real people as far as the stats are concerned.
Yeah, no dignity. All right, so moving on. So Joe, we've got a new COVID variant. I think 50,000 Americans have died so far this year from COVID, which is obviously lower than the high, but it's still a significant number. And this new variant looks like it's evading vaccines, although I've seen different sorts of points of view about that. What are you picking up?
Well, I mean, here's the thing about variants and the way evolution kind of works with viruses, right? If you think about how it works, is it's not that the virus is changing to evade anything or trying to get past the vaccines. It's that it just happens to be that things change. There's always going to be a DNA error. It's going to be a change. No DNA changes because it wants to. It just becomes an error that is successful, right? So when you have an environment where there's all kinds of vaccinations already in place, and you have a virus that's able to spread in that kind of environment, it's the one that has the mutations that allow it to get past the existing vaccination. You know what I mean? So it's important to think about it this way. People tend to think of this evil creature that's a virus that is going like, oh, you're trying to stop me this way, will you? I'll try and go around the other way. It just happens to be that of all the variants that have come out, this is the one that's still thriving despite the circumstances. It's the most successful of the variants, so it becomes the main variant, and it becomes the main form of the disease, right? So what's happened is, and what typically happens is a kind of cat and mouse game, in the sense that there will be a natural evolution. The article in Time talks about how pandemics don't really end; they echo. It really is it.
Yeah.
I mean, the flu that we have is basically an echo of the big flus that we've heard about over time. So today's flu is related to the Spanish flu. It's related to whatever the flu was before that time, right? It's something that doesn't really fully go away, but it's going to be hanging around. And the real challenge that I think the world kind of faces currently is we've become a little bit blasé about everything. I mean, we talk about numbers like this and we say 50,000 have died. And then at the same time we go but it's really not as bad as before. And so we think, maybe not as big a deal. Now, one of the things that really is pretty important for me is when you look at the numbers of people who have died, it's a disproportionate amount of people who are not vaccinated who have died. And that's something that people sometimes, they miss, but that is absolutely a key point. Vaccination helps. It doesn't stop a disease from being able to get to you, but it does help in the sense that it helps maybe your body deal with it, so you don't have as bad a response to the disease. There are many things that can add on to that, but the main thing to know is science is actually having a bit of it can never be up to date to the minute, right? So the newest vaccines that are being rolled out, as much as they are going to make it as accessible as possible, it's going to provide some protection. But know this, that the situation, the environment that this virus is spreading in is one where there are there's a high number of vaccinated people. So the ones that do make it through, or the virus variant that makes it through, is the one that's likely to sort of evade this, right? But the other good news is that the tendency for most viruses into the diseases is that as they progress and they spread more, they become less dangerous, not as many bad symptoms that come along with that. And that's usually what happens if you talk about what a successful virus will be. So if that's the path that happens, we're very hopeful for that. This new variant is of concern because it's not as there are not as many examples yet. There are not as many cases to get the data from. So we don't know exactly how bad it is yet. There's not enough to know how much to worry about it for now. But in general, it works this way, right? If you're going into a place where there are bullets flying around, wear some kind of bullet vest. You might as well.
Yeah. So just I've constantly kept an eye on what's been going on with COVID, and I know most people have completely switched off to it. There's a lot more coming through now. Hollywood's basically readopted mask policies, and a lot of businesses, schools, hospitals, not necessarily. I mean, I've spent a fair bit of time in the hospital this year, and I'm amazed by the amount of people not wearing a mask. To me, it just makes sense. If you go to a hospital or a doctor or a pharmacy next to a doctor, you wear a mask because there's a greater chance that you've been exposed to someone with COVID. So, but keep an eye on it. It's not a story that's gone away. Not at all.
We did a webinar with an expert who does wearables in the US, and he tracks all kinds of data for diseases. And through the wearables, we're finding data of the effect of COVID, long COVID, and stuff like that.
Yeah,
they're finding more things showing up now than we thought before. And if you think about it this way, right? The people who have the wearables have something that is tracking it, and so they find out about it. Most of us don't track anything.
Yeah. I just saw the BBC today, I think, reported blood clots have been connected with long COVID and brain fog. So, they're starting to get a little bit more information about the long-term implications of long COVID. So Spain's had its Me Too moment. Did you guys watch the World Cup final?
Yeah, it was great.
I did not, but I heard about the kiss.
But you didn't watch it. Tim, did you watch it to the end, including the kiss?
We lost broadcast after the end of the game, but I saw the kiss afterwards.
All right. So within the context, so I took my boys and it was great. So the English team come up, hugs, handshakes, congratulations. Then the Spanish team come up, and so you instantly notice the difference because it was kissing on each side of the cheek. So when Jenny Hermoso, the captain, comes up and gets the kiss, I was absolutely repulsed in that moment by that. It looked wrong, right? But then I didn't think about it.
It was the holding of the head.
Yeah, but it didn't look right, you know. And I've just seen some people saying there's some video footage of her laughing about it afterwards, and therefore they're sort of casting some blame on it. It's like every single woman who is abused, in whether it's serious abuse or that sort of abuse, however you rate it, right? Every single woman has spent her entire life laughing off stupid stuff like that. It doesn't mean it wasn't serious what he did, but it's a bigger story, obviously, and it's been a really interesting one to watch the conversation that's going on around it. So Luis Rubiales, however you say his name, he's head of the Spanish Football Federation. There was like 12, 15 women who weren't even there competing because of him and other leaders. He's lashed out, calling it fake feminism, called it a social assassination. But I think he's really misread the moment. And I
agree.
When you have the strength of a World Cup victory behind you, you can finally stand up and say, we've had enough, because they've been saying we've had enough for years, but nobody was listening. And now they're listening. So I found it's a really interesting situation. It's interesting, the conversation that's happening around it, what the opinions. But I just wanted to say, what are you guys picking up? What's your impression of what's been going on?
Joe, I got a lot to say about it.
Well, I was going to say, I think it always is about where you are and which space you're in. I would say that based on what I do and the people that I hang out with, and it came and went again because of so many different things that are happening in the world. People found a way to quickly summarize it and move on. So I'll fess up to that it was on my radar for a moment, and then it just disappeared. I mean, it kind of had been solved in a sense. It's something we've seen before, and now there's an example, and then we're kind of done with it. And that's, I mean, I recognize as I'm talking about it that it's not a great thing that's what happens in the world, but we do get used to stuff and we go like, oh, okay, then we recognize what this is, we put it in that box, and we went like, okay, I'm done with that. It's not as shocking as it should be.
Okay. I think, I agree with that, but I think there's when he calls it a social assassination, I agree with that. I do agree that there's been a moment that's been swept up, and he's been there's that social assassination. However, the reason why that social assassination has happened is because he's like that, and he keep like during the game, he's sitting next to the princess or the queen. And he's standing up, holding his crotch, doing stuff like that. He's not acting in a respectful. He just seems to be this loose cannon, sort of embodiment of testosterone and what power can buy. And I think that the social assassination is about, we don't want that as figureheads of our associations and leadership because it doesn't represent us. He got there by being this sort of loose cannon, but we don't want that. So there's an opportunity for the assassination. So okay, but he hasn't done himself any favors. What he could have done immediately afterwards, when it started to blow up, is to go, I'm so sorry. I'd like to apologize to her and her family and the Spanish people. I was caught up in the moment of just pure joy and just, I was so happy I could kiss her, and I did. You know, he could have just said that and been, but he didn't. What he did was start to lie. His narrative came out with saying to her a quick peck to say that it was consensual, and then he kissed her, which if you look at the video, that never happened. There was not enough time for that to happen. The conversation that he said happened never happened. And then the Spanish Football Federation released a statement on her behalf saying that she's fine with it all, when she never authorized that statement, it sounds like, because she immediately came out and said, no, I wasn't happy with it at all. And so then there was like you've embarrassed us and sanctions on you. But then the whole world has got behind her to say, hell no. So it's like he's pulled the strings of his political power to try and change the narrative. And I think the surrounding bodies, now that it's got to storm proportions, originally had one narrative was they're all applauding his "I will not resign" rhetoric, which on one sense, if you've built your career on something and you did that kiss, in a sense, you shouldn't have to resign. If he'd done the "I'm sorry, it was I was just caught up in the emotion of it was the wrong thing to do, I apologize to everybody." If he'd done that, I think people would have forgiven him, but he didn't. And I guess his history of crotch grabbing in front of princesses and all this sort of stuff is just like, this guy's got to go. He's a relic of the past that is still in power today, and that relic needs to be consigned to a history that we'd like to move away from. And I think as a result, his resignation was called for, and
Well, I think in terms of believability as well, you have to think about what happens. A man, I think, is a sum of his total actions. So I think the people who came forward after that are really what decided what the story really was. Because up until a certain point, you can go like, this could go either way. It could lean this way. It could lean that way.
Yep.
And then when a whole bunch of other people, resign in support of her, then you realize that there's a lot of smoke going on here. There must be some fire, right? I mean, I think that was really it. I think I think sometimes we oversimplify and say, oh, what you should have done is this. It's kind of, to me, it's like, well, this is how you should lie your way out of this.
No. I'm saying, had he genuinely said that, not he should have said that in a way to get out of it, but had he genuinely said, this is what happened, but he didn't. So he's basically showing his cards as manipulator, liar, and protector of his power, rather than genuine human being that's, flawed in that moment and inappropriate, but because of his, like you said, the sum of the parts and some of his experience and everything else, I think people would have forgiven, except that he's not like that. And then he did what he did to defend himself. Well, so
there's a great article in the ABC News, which is the Australian ABC, not the American. And the title is "An Infamous Spanish Kiss Overshadowed Meritorious Women Doing Their Job. Can You Believe It?" And it goes through all of the details of the Women's World Cup, not just the kiss, but everything that happened throughout, how the women are paid, the facilities and support that they have, even the cost of the TV rights, which is well below men's sports. Like in some cases, like what they got, for the whole tournament is a week for like the AFL. And it was the most watched sporting event ever in Australia. And if you know Australians, they watch a lot of sport. But Annabelle Crabb wrote it, and she goes, "Whenever women move into male-dominated fields, whether it be politics, media, the resources sector, you name it, they are regularly reminded of the importance of making it on merit. There's a double fiction at play here. First, that men have always gained their successes on merit, and second, that merit in women will be recognized and rewarded the same way as it is in genuinely talented men." Several weeks of sustained and glorious high performance by a fleet of underpaid women from whom our rapt gaze was periodically distracted only by a series of less gifted dudes setting their own silly asses on fire. I thought that was a really good one. But there was also a cartoon in Spanish that's translated, "Grandma, tell me about how your team won the World Cup." And the grandmother says, "We didn't just win the World Cup, little one. we won so much more. And that's what I hope comes out of this. We won so much more, that it doesn't become another opportunity for men and women to hate each other, for us to say, we need to improve. We need to do better. And this is obviously not just Spain, but we have to, there's so much negativity since Me Too that worries me more than anything. It really worries me where we're going, and, you know, the war on women. And we have to be careful. So another story, because of course Italy didn't want to lose out on their Me Too moment. The husband of the Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who's of course right-wing, appeared to suggest that women could avoid rape by not getting too drunk. Opposition parties have called on the Prime Minister to distance herself from his comments. So they've got a daughter together. But basically he said, if you go dancing, you are fully entitled to get drunk. But if you avoid getting drunk and losing consciousness, perhaps you'll also avoid getting in trouble, because then you'll find the wolf. And so the whole concept is women are responsible if they are raped, versus men are responsible if they rape. And also rape is violence. You know, would he say men should not get drunk and unconscious to avoid violence? You know, so it's just victim blaming once again. And it's just, I'm a bit tired of it.
Okay, here's where I stretch my neck out across again to be chopped off, right?
Excellent.
I've gone to San Francisco and walked down the wrong street before, right? And I know someone could say to me that if I got mugged there and if something had happened to me, it'd be terrible for me to be blamed for walking down the wrong street. I was attacked by somebody else or whatever it is. I don't feel it's terrible when one thing is given the power to be the solution to everything. And I think there's something in this, in the sense that there is something about being vigilant. There's something about whatever in terms of self-protection. So I'm not saying that, you know, you can stop it, you can make it go away, whatever it is. But I think there's something here about vigilance. And I think what happens here is that they're taking, and I'm not saying that that's not what he was saying, but I'm just saying that it's a kind of preloaded anger that goes in there. Like every time something happens, and if someone says that, well, you could have done something to make it to do something to make it less to make it safer for yourself or whatever it is, and you're blaming somebody else who doesn't deserve the blame. I put it to you this way, that I think there's a case for vigilance, and there's also a case for learning to say it better. You know, I think there's something in this because you can be in a situation where you are like for instance, if I were to say to myself, there are dangerous places around town, and even in Singapore, if I was talking about it's a very safe country, is there a place that are there places that I would say are less safe than others? I would say yes. Certain kinds of behavior would be less safe for myself. I'd have to say yes. You know what I'm saying? I think that there is something in there, but it's not like it's the only solution. I'm not saying that if you don't get drunk, you don't get raped, but I think there's some validity in the idea that, no, be vigilant. You know, like when my girls go out, especially, I say, watch your drinks. Just really watch your drinks, because I don't want them to have people put pills in them or what have you and all that. And I teach them about those things. And if I were to say, like, you know, if we could stop half the rapes if we just watched our drinks, I have a feeling that might come back on me again and say, well, you're blaming the people who are exposed to this because of that. And I go like, well, yes, but at the same time, watch your passwords and you might not get scammed, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, Tim, Joe, like, when a woman when a woman does go to court for rape because she's been raped, what's the first thing they ask her?
What were you wearing?
Yeah. So,
well, I don't know. I made that up. I mean, is that what they ask?
No, it's exactly what they ask, right? So, women, being vigilant, absolutely. Walking down an area in San Francisco, which is a bit dodgy, of course, you're putting your life in your hands, right? But women have always been raped. Like, you know, the whole modesty in religion is based on women being modest so that the men don't cast their eyes on their body, which is once again blaming women for men's actions. I think we're just beyond the time where well, first of all, rape is violence. It's not sex. So that's one thing. But the other thing is we never seem to want to confront the fact that we need to address the men who are capable of rape. You know, what is wrong with them? How do we help them? How do we fix that within our societies? What creates that? You know, like if I talk to any of my male friends about rape, which I do, they can't even conceive doing that to a woman, any woman. They can't even conceive it, right? But there are a percentage of men in our world who can. So when are we going to start addressing that rather than making the victims responsible for the action? That's all I'm saying.
So I think then, I mean, Andrea, I agree with you. And I understand Joe's point too.
Yeah.
I think, though, the problem is so huge on the addressing the men's side. I mean, this is not to say that we shouldn't. Of course we should. That it seems to be like, because the problem, this is Joe's point, because the problem is so huge, be careful of walking into the problem. And, but how do we address it? I mean, I could go down one line, but the more you deteriorate moral standards in the world and remove moral controls, the more likely you are to have immorality. It doesn't mean that moral controls mean, when I say controls, I don't mean the moral police like you have in some countries, the morality police, but when you take away that value ethic from a cultural from a culture and a cultural tradition, and you take away that value ethic and you say it's all individualism and everything goes, and then you feed them with media of this dominance and that you should be having this, then it creates this sense of, and you create the societal position or situation where the people feel emasculated, and not only that, poor. And the ideal is to be rich. So you are not everything that you're supposed to be and everything else. Then there's anger that ends up happening. And if there's no moral control over that, you're going to, from the individual, you're going to let loose. So we can kill religion all we like and remove it from our everythings. And I'm not saying it's the only solution, but when you do that, some of this stuff's going to happen. And the thing is, even when the world was far more religious than it was still happening. So it comes down to a perception of power and powerlessness, and I just think it's got to be it. I think the respect side, you know, I mean, the only real solution in a sense is an indoctrination from school perspective of respect for each, and physical strength and power doesn't equal societal strength and power or your ability to do whatever you want. And from that perspective, coming down hard on bullies needs to be huge, but at the same time, why is the bully bullying? So it's one of those ones where, because the problem is so big, you can understand why someone would say be careful when you walk into the problem area, because this is where those sexual predators are going to be. They're going to be in a nightclub, you know, if the Rohypnol drops and all this sort of stuff is the
or in your own family, right?
In
your own family, it's kind of like you can't escape it. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of podcasts and articles coming out now about that there's a problem for men, with men in the world, and I'm kind of happy to see the conversation happening. There's more sort of groups of men coming together and talking about their feelings. You know, that sort of stuff is starting to happen, and I think, you know, yes, it is a big problem. You know, the whole incel movement. I was listening to a podcast. You know, like. The dating game is a nightmare for the majority of guys. So, you know, they're rejected at every level. So I understand both sides, but I think we need to solve it. But we have to stop blaming women for being raped. It's not
100% agree on
their
that.
fault. it's not their fault, and rape is not sex, it's violence, and those distinctions. But what about talking about religion? Because that's another sort of conversation that's coming up a lot at the moment. Is we need more spirituality in the world. It needs to be a pillar of the climate fight, but also oh no, it's just gone. The Pope's been pretty active, Tim.
Yeah.
What have you been noticing?
Yeah, there's so the Pope the Pope's been attacked by American conservatives in the Catholic conservatives. So he's blasted them as being backward, which
irony.
I mean, it just seems what, but he's blasted the backwardness of some conservatives in the U.S. Catholic Church, saying that they've replaced faith with ideology, and I agree with him. And that a correct understanding of Catholic and Catherine's possibly, but Catholic doctrine allows for change over time. So let me just say that again. He says that they've replaced faith with ideology, and that a correct understanding of Catholic doctrine allows for change over time. This is a really interesting. I mean, it's interesting that he said that he's okay. Francis's comments were acknowledged. Were an acknowledgement of the divisions in the U.S. Catholic Church, which has been split between progressives and conservatives who long found support in the doctrinaire papacies of John Paul II and Benedict XVI. They were both from very conservative faction of the Catholic Church, by the way, particularly on issues of abortion and same-sex marriage. Actually, those two came in. There was Vatican II in the 65, which was hugely revolutionary from the Catholic Church perspective, as a lot of change was starting to come in. And those two were from a very conservative faction that got papal power and started to pull back some of those things as well. Just from a church history side, by the way. Anyway, many conservatives have blasted Francis's emphasis instead on social justice issues such as the environment and the poor. I don't know why would they blast him on that, honestly. And so they're blasting him on social justice issues such as the environment and the poor, while also branding him as heretical. His opening to letting divorced and civilly remarried Catholics receive the sacraments, particularly Holy Communion, presumably. Sticking with the Christian demographic, Britain has dropped below 50%. So this is a different story. Has dropped below 50% and should now no longer be considered a Christian country, which is also quite interesting. That's coming from their frontline clergy. But what do you think? What do you think of the US? I mean, for me, the US side is the United States has devolved a little bit into, I've said this before on the show, has devolved into a little bit into an entire society built on choose your team, and then toe the party line on whatever your team is, regardless of if they're wrong. And once you've chosen your team, you support your team. I mean, that's what you do in football, isn't it? You pick a team, you support it even when they're at the bottom of the ladder. Unfortunately, supporting your political team when they're at the bottom of the ladder and beneath where the ladder actually ends is not a good idea. And bringing in religion to support your political ideology, which is why the Pope's saying they've moved from faith to ideology, is really challenging. So the thing about faith, I mean, from the Protestant side, there's this thing called the Wesleyan quadrilateral, where the things that inform our belief is scripture, tradition, reason, and experience. And tradition is the one that the conservatives are largely holding on to, sometimes perhaps without evaluating where that tradition actually came from. But tradition is really important. It's part of its culture, really. It's the way that we've done things. It's the way we do things. And so it is important. But sometimes you got to figure out why that tradition started in the first place. Okay.
Yeah. Joe?
Well, okay, the thing about religion is there's this kind of to me, it's not been voted on as an idea, but the idea that religion and politics should sort of be separate areas. There's a division of power between church and state and all that kind of stuff. But this is something that has been adopted as a kind of a standard, and people kind of go with it without thinking very much about it. They say, okay, that's a reasonable way to do things, and it seems quite wise, right? And so the problem is life goes on day to day with politics as well. So you look for like you talk about these days and teams and all that. Well, let's go back to the very beginning, right? I mean, there's a whole thing about what the Catholic Church and the whole the church broke basically a long time ago over differences of beliefs and what was right and what was my flavor and your flavor and what have you, your belief. And so that was happening a long time ago. That happens all the time. And the thing is, now the Pope is getting involved in a way that is getting uncomfortable for those who thought that, okay, the areas that we discuss are usually on they're not so down the center, right? So it used to be, I think, if you talk about Catholic Church and where it got its fingers wet, would be in the areas of it was very clear how they would get the fingers wet in terms of abortion or gay, about queer lifestyles and what have you, right? And it was very clear before, and it became less clear now. It's become this thing where I have developed my own belief about what it should be, and then now the boss says, no, it's not quite that. Right, and he has the authority to do that. I mean, we talk about it in terms of purely based on corporate structure and what it's supposed to be. He's the guy who can say it, and he's the guy who is saying it correct because he's been, he's infallible. So that therefore it is correct. But it makes us hugely uncomfortable because what have I been doing all this time, right? And there's a thing about how we are as human beings, which is it completely doesn't make sense, but it's the way we are. It's like, we've been doing this for such a long time. We've paid this price for such a long time. We've made this sacrifice for such a long time. Now you have to do it too. And we're very uncomfortable with the idea that, you know what, back in the old days, if you were divorced, you couldn't receive communion. And suddenly the new guy now says it's okay. That upsets the people who back in the day went, hang on, we didn't do all those things because we wanted to have we wanted access to the church as we wanted it back then, right? So it upsets those people. I mean, one clear example would be any couple that put off divorce because it was going to prevent them from partaking in any of the other sacraments, for instance. They'd be terribly upset if they sacrificed all that in the past, and now it's like, oh, so now everyone gets it, and they could divorce after all. It's become a bit different, right? It used to be that you could just almost in a blanket way just reject anything homosexual, and now it's like, oh no, it's okay. We're taking a different approach to it. It's different from the brand that you bought in the first place. So it's a if you talk about it from a product point of view, it's a branding perspective, right? It's like, if I'm trying to think of a brand, but if you think of something like Bossini, not Bossini, sorry, Benetton, for instance, suddenly coming up with a new brand which said, nope, whites only. It just isn't going to be the brand that people bought in the first place.
Which was the colors of Benetton, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean,
the Pope's, but he sort of talked about, the environment and the poor being the priority, which I believe is correct. But in order for the Catholic Church to truly talk about taking care of the poor and the environment, then contraception and abortion needs to be put on the table, because, population is an issue in the fight that we've got on our hands. And so that's a struggle. But, this whole idea that it always stays the same, it's never stayed the same, and it's 2,000-year history. But the Pope's about to, I think it's like at the beginning of October, he's about to share his next thoughts on it's one of those words on climate change. Apparently, the last time he did it, it got a lot of attention. But he's ready to go out full force. But there's another story that is circulating, is the crisis that humanity is facing, which is going to get worse and worse. It's not just an environmental impact; it's food shortages, inflations, economic meltdowns, societal collapse, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
One of the risks of that, of course, is extreme religious groups rising. So that's another sort of threat that we've got in the mix of what we face as we look forward. So when you look back to history, when religion sort of clamped down and became quite extremist, the burning of the witches, those sort of phases, we potentially could be moving into another time where religious extremism is something that becomes quite prevalent.
Well, the fundamental challenge that we have is that we've always given religion this kind of wide berth in terms of what you want to believe, right? And that's why we have the Rastafarians. What was it? The Pastafarians, I believe, that religion. And then they have the Jedi as well in real life. You know, it's because we have given this too wide a berth to it that it gets to go and do all these things. Basically, we're saying that, okay, we're in general, we don't like viruses, but if it's a religious virus, go ahead. We have to give you some room because that's the brand of it.
Religion is a virus. I like it. All right, so Ukraine. That's I don't know where you guys are with that. You know, we obviously saw the very, very public political assassination of the Wagner head. We still don't know who did that. You know, obviously Putin is being blamed. He's saying he didn't do it. Who knows, right? The head of Russia's the general who was running the war on behalf of Russia was out. You know, we've heard Ukrainians are having significant successes taking over territory that the Russians have. We've seen social chaos in Moscow, sort of, you know, Putin driving down at high speed when he's supposed to be somewhere else. Is it Putin? Is it a double? There's one picture where he's got his watch on the right hand. You know, so what the hell's happening? Has this assassination of Prigozhin sort of re-established his power base? We don't know. And I think another thing that's really become very apparent is that drone warfare is here to stay. And we're seeing the skills and the mastery of drone warfare really, really on our TVs. I follow loads of experts on Twitter who've been talking about this since the beginning, really sort of listening to what's going on. And I think one of the things that's really sort of started to emerge for me lately is this deep weariness that comes from extended wars that Ukrainians are starting to feel. You know, they've lost so many people. Just imagine living that every day, day to day, but also the resilience of them as they want to protect their homeland. So, but, you know, there's another side of it where I feel like we could be on the cusp of it rippling out and obviously engulfing more of Europe, which obviously means the whole world. So I don't feel like there's a lot of great hope there at the moment. You know, I still think that this war is going to end in Russia. But what do you guys think?
I try not to think about what the winning move will be, because I keep thinking about how can you end this, and it's not pretty. I mean, you know, it's like one is we have a reset, some way to reset this, but the people involved are not inclined to. I mean, I'm speaking about the Ukrainians as well, right? I mean, it's not. It's one of those things where. I mean, it's a terrible thing to think about, but it reminds me of that story of it's a comedian who talks about, you know, the shark, and he's heard about how you gotta punch a shark in the face so that it won't attack you, right? And he says,
in the nose.
Shark comes. Sorry,
in the nose.
Yeah. So he says a shark comes up, and then you hear about this thing, and you punch the shark in the nose, and then now the shark's got no choice because his friends are watching. So that's kind of what's happened with Russia and Ukraine, right? I mean, there's the perceived schoolyard bully, and then there's the perceived hero who's come back as well, and both sides are actually stuck in their position as well. Both sides are in a situation where they can't just say, you know what, I think it's time for a pause. Let's do the thing that's going to make us be okay with a pause. So you know, really, if you talk about, I mean, like the way you hear about assassinations, it's hard to imagine a way that this is going to go, an easier way to go than actually an assassination. That's not a very good view to share. They're not a popular view, but if you think about that, it's one of the ways to hit reset. But
then we'd probably see the entire collapse of Russia, right? And infighting and even more extreme people becoming leaders, and that's always been the risk. But I think, you know, China's got a role to play. So another story is obviously what's going on with the BRICS. So,
man.
Yeah.
So BRICS is the organization of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It is basically it's kind of an economic bloc that's forming together, but they're also looking in terms of the additional kinds of commonalities, and it's the idea of it is to kind of serve as a balance. But again, not everybody has the same kind of I would say motives or motivations really within the group, right? I mean, for some of them, it's just better economics for their people. Some of them might be much more about just making more money. And for some, it also is about ideology. I mean, you have Putin appearing at this particular summit via video feed, so he can't get arrested because he's accused of war crimes. I mean, it's a different situation to perhaps India or Brazil. In fact, and then of course Brazil also didn't show up as well, apparently for this particular meeting in person, at least as far as the president was concerned, and that was because of the further politics of the world in general, right? I mean, you have, as much as you want to form this new group as well to maybe stand up to the West in terms of being a balancing power in terms of economics as well as ideology. You also have the partners who are the big boys, right? It's a little bit like how Singapore is poised in terms of who we are friends with, right? We have to think about, am I going to show up for your birthday party or your birthday party, because it might not look good, right? So
Singapore would turn up at both. Singapore would go to both.
Singapore would show. We would be at both parties, but I think we decide who we send. So I think that's what's happening there. It's interesting to see what will happen and whether or not it will grow to be something where it is about economic power, which is arguably, I think, enough to try and turn the way the world works, or it may go further. I mean, will it become a defense partnership? And, as far apart as all these countries are, I mean, I would have imagined it hard for Australia, France, America, and the UK coming together with a defense pact, but they did as well. So, nothing is beyond a relationship when you have mutual enemies.
Yeah, it's definitely, the BRICS are definitely something to keep an eye on. There's been some really interesting. Kishore Mahbubani, I'm going to put it in the weekend reads. He had a little interview, I think, on the BBC that I saw the other day. Or actually, it might not be in the reads because I can't find it again. But he was very eloquent, as he always is. But Tim, October the 4th, I think, is Australia's next referendum, which 14th, is the yes.
It is, isn't it?
14th. There was 4 in there. So yes, no vote.
Yeah, we got a vote on The Voice, which is it's about giving Indigenous peoples of Australia a voice with government. And there's a referendum happening. Yes, no vote. Do you want to give them a voice or not? That's what it sounds like. So there's two sides to this. And the one side, this was Simon Holmes a Court's tweet, right? That he said, he said, I'm told there's many Australians who haven't seen how simple the proposed constitutional amendment actually is. And then he sort of posts this 4 parts of the constitutional amendment where he says it's about recognition, a guarantee, purpose, and detail. Whereas recognition, it's in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia. The guarantee that there shall be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice, and that its purpose is that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' voice may make representations to the Parliament and the executive government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And in the detail, the Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, functions, powers, and procedures. Okay, so the yes vote is saying, come on, can't we just put in the Constitution that they were here when colonization happened, that they're the first peoples of Australia, and that we give them that dignity and respect that says we acknowledge you. You are not we're not putting you in the background and we go along our business. So that seems to be, and fair go, give them a representation, give them a voice. Fair enough. That's the yes party side. Would you agree that that would be the summary of the yes party side, Andrea?
Yeah, that
yeah.
sounds...
I mean, kind of. And the no party is saying a couple of different things. They're saying well, yeah, okay, fair enough, but there's not enough details of what's going to happen afterwards, and there are some of the No Party is saying there's a lot of legal stuff that may come from this, and have we thought it through, and we're not getting the detail. A lot of it's about where are the details, and there's a lot of legal stuff. So both kind of have valid, objections, and so then it's asking the people, well, what do you think? And so now, if the people vote yes, then this will start to begin. And so it was Julie Bishop, who's now, I think, the governor of the Australian National University or something, but she was formerly a senator from the
Liberal Party. Yeah.
From the Liberal Party, right? So actually, John Howard in 2007 said, let's go to referendum on this very issue. And then he was voted out of office. And and then the Labour Party didn't do anything. And then they were all sort of muddling around what was actually happening. And now it's the Labour Party on the yes side and the Liberal Party on the no side, it seems to be, which is always the way it is in Australia. You know, everybody seems to want to have, anyway, whatever. But I guess my point is, question your, for people listening to the show that are going to vote on this one, but really in any referendum, don't just read the side and make a quick decision. Really question what it means from a people perspective and what it means from a future perspective. I agree with the dignity and respect that needs to be afforded the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I completely agree with that. My concern is the legalities or the details haven't been put in, and it almost sounds like, if I want to be skeptical, it sounds like it's been pushed through with vagueness so that it gets voted down. That would be that, because once it gets voted down, it's not going to come to referendum again for a long time. In 2017, that Heart of Uluru message was penned, and it is very much it's a beautiful document that has a very obvious lawyer's chunk in the middle of it, which to some people could be disconcerting as to what it may mean. I've spoken to some people in Oz that are against it, and their point of view is about land rights and mining rights based on, you've got land rights to a particular depth, and beyond that, the land, it's sort of mineable or whatever it is. And there's this lot of vague stuff and a lot of disconcerting arguments from that side. So WA apparently are worried that the yes vote campaign is worried that WA may vote no. What needs to happen for the referendum to pass is that a majority of Australian states and territories need to vote yes. I think 4 out of the 6 need to be voting yes. A majority of Australians need to vote yes. So majority of Australians need to vote yes. A majority of the states need to have voted yes, and a majority somewhere else need to have voted yes as well. So it's a lot of conditions for it to get across the line. It's a big piece, but because it involves a constitutional change, and but it can be undone with another referendum, but that's unlikely to happen. I think once it goes in, I think that's going to be the way that Australia happens for a while. One of the other mentions from the No campaign was, why is one element of Australian society getting this special constitutional, like, referendum on a constitutional body that's representing them, and why can't they just have a constitutional body that is being represented? I think it's which you could argue, okay, fair enough, but I think this is because there's been a lot of injustice done to the Aboriginal people over time, and from from the time of the first settlers through to the stolen generation, through to the request for an apology, and some even from the Aboriginal left wing are saying vote no, which is interesting because they think it should be about treaty first. Because the argument is that the Aboriginals never ceded authority over Australian land to the colonizers. So, I mean, if you go down one path, it could go down the land rights, and then we have legal rights over the land, so give me my land back, and then you've just bought a house and you've lost it. So then everybody will vote no if they think that you could lose your property and your possessions and stuff based on legal stuff and constitutional, etc. And it's that lack of detail that I think the no campaigners are saying we need to know what's going to happen after this. What's the cascade of waterfall that's going to happen, and what's the intention? Because it just seems a little bit muddy. So it's a tough one. So I guess the thing is just go and read both sides.
And that's the most important thing, is educate yourself.
Yep.
Whatever opinion you've got, listen to the other side as well and go deep and spend some time with it. We've never gotten it right. And it's time to give our First Nations people what they want, to give them dignity, to give them respect. It's time, and we've never gotten it right. Nothing before has worked. So and the other thing, I'm so sick of cynical politics, and it's all over the world. We know it's all over the world, right? But Australia has been playing this cynical politics like the US have been playing for a long time, and the people who suffer that are never a majority. It's always a minority, and so we have to get beyond that too. Like we should move through, but the US, there's all sorts of stuff going on in the US. But there was this one tweet, the Republicans against Trump. They're pretty active on Twitter and pretty interesting if you're on Twitter. Still, most people aren't. Yesterday, Donald Trump, who lives in Florida, has been posting non-stop about his poll numbers, money he made from the mugshot, attacks on judges, prosecutors, Christie, DeSantis, and everyone else. But he's yet to post anything about Hurricane Idalia. It's almost as if he's a narcissistic sociopath who doesn't give a shit about anyone but himself. I thought, very well said. But let's get into the final section because we're over time. The state of our environment. You guys have seen everything that's been going on.
Yep.
Well, that's a big call.
Well, you remember I said a long time ago with a lot of things with a lot of things, right? It's someone has to die, right? That really is the way we really pay attention. And for a while, it seemed we paid attention. But again, like we've seen again since then, people move on, and it's about different. It becomes about different things which don't make. Like for instance, one of the things that I noticed is I went to an event here in Singapore, and the speakers, it was an environmental event, and the speakers spoke about sustainability and spoke about and mentioned Maui, right? And what really I was disappointed to be honest about the comment. It was not about the people, it was about the economic loss. And I thought, yes, you can measure the size of the problem in terms of economics and stuff, but it really is terrible when that many people can die, and the headline on the speech about it is, it could cost billions. That really is something that struck me, and I think it really is about who's in charge. What are the primary concerns that they have as the people in charge? Because I've seen this over and over again. A long time ago now, it just hasn't left me. But a long time ago, Singapore Airlines had, I think it was an accident. I can't remember what the details were, but again, it was the second sentence in the PR communication at the time was about, and shareholder value has been preserved, or something like that. It wasn't about what the the human cost was, the horrible things that were happening on the ground. I mean, the stories that I heard about what happened in Maui were just really heartbreaking and just
Horrific.
shocking, right? I mean, people escaping into the sea, and to hear people dying as you're taking refuge in the sea, and you can't help anybody who's out there who you can hear, being taken by the fire, those kinds of things.
Yeah, those are terrible, terrible stories. Like one guy he was talking about a dog, a big pit bull that he rescued and got to the ocean, but couldn't get the dog in the ocean. And he swam into the ocean. He kept trying to get this dog in, and he could hear it crying as it was dying. And, and people respond to animals more than they respond to human suffering, right? So, but yeah, the horrific stories and terrible mistakes. And I've seen some people talking about it like it's some sort of conspiracy. And it's like, no, people just make mistakes in situations like that because nobody knows what's going on. And then the disaster capitalism, they're going to run in and buy up the property and turn it into another big resort paradise. It's like, no, this is surely we're getting the message now. This is an opportunity to rewild it back to its original, way where it was moist, where it would never, get on fire. Like I think about the tropical regions where we live, and I was in this city called Hua Hin, and I walked past the fire station. I thought it was a museum because the fire engines were so old, and I literally thought it was a museum. And I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, they're talking about the tropical forests are losing their ability to, what is it, for the water to come out, transpiration. So if we start seeing mass die-offs, we're going to start seeing mass fires in this part of the world as well, right? So we're not paying attention, and we're not ready. We're not ready for what's coming at all. We're not paying attention to what's coming, and it's time. But the Oprah and The Rock have come together. They're going to give all of the citizens who own a property or rent a property over $1,000, I think, a week or something, or a month, or they're coming in to really help us. But yeah, tragedy, but we need that sort of scale. But to me, what's coming next is actually what I'm concerned about. And I feel that the media isn't. So in February, there was a piece in Australia which was talking about the prediction that Australia would suffer the worst grass fires they've ever suffered. Yeah. And they already had their last worst fire season in 2019 when the last El Nino was at play, right? So now all these floodings happened with La Nina. So now Australia is ready. And a couple of weeks ago, some big fires broke out in New South Wales. Yeah. Massive reaction to it. Like the planes and the helicopters were brought in straight away. It's like they've learned their lesson. Let's get it out as quickly as we can. In Canada, some of those early fires that broke out, they were due to budget cuts because they had this fast reaction force that could have dealt with it, but they've reduced the budget, so they didn't do it. So therefore, here we are, this incredible record of fire. And, every time we have these massive fires, especially up north, they dump brown carbon onto the Arctic. The Arctic melts. We're getting close to a blue ocean event, and that's record temperatures again. So, so Australia's got this incredible fire season, which has basically begun in August when it's not supposed to happen until the 1st of October. It's going to be off the charts, but it's also going to have the heat. We've seen massive coral die off, right, bleaching across the north. And there's these stupid conversations going on about the Great Barrier Reef in the last few months. And so this El Nino that's going to come with the heat, we've got global ocean temperatures now when it's not supposed to be until March. So if the temperature keeps increasing between now and March, and then what does that increasing temperature mean? Not just killing off the coral and all the life in the ocean, and people are still talking about whether or not what it's true. But what concerns me even more is, first of all, what Australia's going to face. But the next thing is, what are we going to face when the hot season kicks in from next February? We had wet bulb temperatures this year. Horrible. We had this year, India and Bangladesh and Pakistan have had it for 2 years. So, but what happens this year and next year when El Nino gets firmly embedded, So I'm very concerned. People aren't getting prepared. Australians are starting to get prepared for fire, but they've also got to get prepared for the heat. You know, one of the pieces that I'm going to share in my weekend reads is the burns can cook them in a matter of seconds, lying on the concrete. If you fall over or something, you can get 3rd-degree burns. But these burns are so bad that it impacts your brain, your internal organs. It's really, really terrible. So we've got all this coming up, and you know, a lot of people in this part of the world, in the global south, do not live in infrastructure that can cope with these extreme heats. It just can't. So that's what I'm concerned about. Very concerned about.
Well, I think the problem is always about comprehensibility, right? This thing where you think that this is something that can happen. It's like when someone tells you, like when I tell my friends about it, it's because you know your story and how for you and your family, you don't plan the long term to be in Australia, right? And I share with my friends about that, and I say this is really all the stuff that's happening. It's becoming that bad that this is the case and that's the case and what have you and all that. And people can't imagine that to be the case. They're still planning to go to Australia for the cool weather. And I go like, it's not happening. You know, you can go to different parts of the world right now where you expect the weather to be what it used to be, and it just isn't happening. You go to the UK in spring and it's hot. You know, it's just and hot by Singapore standards, right? It's not just it's changed so much, but people can't comprehend that that's the case. People look at it and go like, oh, we're just having this strange one-off thing, and they really rationalize it away, and it's just the way we are as human beings. We do work things out that way. We need that far away perspective to be clearer. So we need a moment that is similar to, I guess, when the first picture of the Earth was released, where you saw that long perspective on the Earth, and you found, okay, we're all in this together. That's fine. We need something like that on a global scale about weather, because as much as you hear about the fires, as much as you hear about, you know, I mean, fires all over the world. I mean, Australia, you've had the fires so many times already. And I think it really still hasn't landed that it's not because it wasn't well maintained. It's not because they were a fire preparedness or what have you and all that. It's because the world is getting hotter, it's drier, and Australia is not the same place as it used to be. And the trend is where it's going. I mean, you know, people can't comprehend the idea of the Great Barrier Reef going away, but it has. You know, and it's like it's such an incomprehensible thing that people do feel that it's not real. It can't be real that it's happened, because all my life I've known it to be this way, and now it's just gone. I don't believe you. You know.
Yeah, it's really. Yeah.
Well, some of them are such a slow burn that it's easy to turn away and get focused on the immediate stuff, like, you know, fixing your washing machine or something, and then you're consumed into that and you forget about the bigger picture. A lot of this comes down to voting for people who are going to take these bigger issues seriously, and being very wary of those that are just pandering to an immediate grab for power. I mean, the entire show, when you look at it, the entire show has been about respect for people. When you actually look at all the articles, it's about respect for people and respect for the land. We've had Johannesburg fires, respect for the people that have come in to escape whatever tyranny that they've run away from, and they're hiding in these places. And the Ukraine war, it's about, you know, people who don't want to fight against people who are defending their background, their backyard. The Italian rape thing is about respect for people. It's like, don't blame the victim. The Spanish kiss, the whole thing is about respect for women. The Australian voice is about respect for Indigenous people. The papal focus on social justice and causes, and the some of the Americans is getting fed up with that because they're not interested in their sort of myopia. You know, his focus is respect for people. All the fires, the Maui fires again. I mean, and then there's dignity for the land and respect for the land and respect for the place that we live. And it's quite interesting that if you look at of the articles, we need respect, but we sometimes we misinterpret respect we need humility with respect.
Yeah.
We misinterpret respect as pride, as defending my pride, but it isn't. It's about giving and losing yourself in that giving, and not needing to, shareholder value is protected. It's about this is right, and let's help people. And it's frustrating to feel powerless in this if we are truly alone in this argument, and if people are interested in wanting to take to be involved. It's like, Singapore's at the polls today. It's about voting for, wherever you are in the world, it's about voting for politicians and holding them to account on the issues that really matter. And that's about people and the planet. And and then now the animal activists will go, well, what about the animals? Okay, well, it's creation care, from a church perspective. It's social care from a people perspective.
All life on Earth, right?
It's and it's at one point it's also about when is gaining for self enough that we can then go, let's gain for others, let's help others. I've got enough for me and my family. How can I help others as well? And it's a tough one. But
so just look, get ready for the heat, especially in the global south. I've written, I think, 2 versions of a blog. I'm getting some translated into different languages so that we can get it to the people who need help. Get prepared. If you're living in a tin shack, you're probably not going to even be able to listen to this. But those of us who are capable, we need to get out there and we need to make sure our communities are safe. And it's always the poorest people in our communities that are going to face this. But if we don't get ready for this, millions could die in the coming 12 months from the heat. So Australia's obviously going to be hit first, especially with the fire and the heat. But then the rest of us are going to have to face up to this, and I'm concerned. So we need to get ready. All right. So it's our first show for the year. What's been distracting you guys before we close off?
Joe,
apart from study.
Well, for me, I occasionally I get into all these rabbit holes and start consuming series, right? So I've been going down these investigative series. First of all, Bones, which is quite an old series now, but it's about anthropological study to uncover crimes. It's called forensics. That the word comes to me at last.
Is it about that though, really? Is it?
Well, no. I mean, the story is quite interesting because it's based around the story of a forensic anthropologist. She's quite famous in real life as well.
Yep.
And so the characters are quite interesting, and that's what's been fun. And now, of course, I'm kind of rewatching House, which as some of you may know, that House is actually based on Sherlock Holmes. It's supposed to be Sherlock Holmes applied to the medical context. And it's kind of fun, kind of a mixture of comedy and then a central unlikable genius character, who is bit by bit reminding me of myself. So I think I have to reconsider how I approach things. As my lawyer once said to me, I'm somebody who enjoys too much the prospect of telling someone they're wrong.
You're right about that. Go and watch Scrubs then, Joe. That sort of comic version. That's quite funny, actually, Scrubs. That was also a really old show, since you're in the old show category. Andrea, what about you? What's keeping you fun and occupied, right, so I can live vicariously through the both of you?
Yeah, right, because you're focused on studying. So I watched Arnold. Have you had a chance to watch that? So it's obviously about Arnold Schwarzenegger. And look, Arnold's gotten a lot wrong in his life and has been judged for it. But I don't know. I've watched him in the last few years from, the way he deals with politics in the US, especially his anti-Trump stuff. And it's just, it's just a really, really, really good show, and it's a lot more inspirational than you probably expect. And he's also launching a book, so that was, I think, the motivation. There's another series called
I like
sort of like, yeah, no, I love Arnie. Painkiller, which is about the opioid addiction in America, is absolutely worth a watch. It's just shocking that ever happened. But another series that I finished, it's a quick one, is called Transatlantic, and it's World War II, based in Marseille, and it's just about the refugees. And basically, there were a group of people trying to get the intellectuals, the artists out and to America. And it was like I watched it, and it was like an imperfect way of telling it. And then the more I thought about it, the more I appreciated it. And then they did a making of it where they interviewed all the characters who were talking about it. And I really, I think it's a really important show to watch, as far as we have more and more refugees now than we've had since that time. And I think it's a really important show to watch to understand what being a refugee is. And it's not all dark. There's light, there's joy, there's beauty, there's fear, there's horror. And I found it incredibly powerful. So if you have an opportunity, watch Transatlantic and then watch the making of it afterwards.
So should we watch Transatlantic or House?
Transatlantic.
Okay. Yeah,
All
well,
right.
like Andrea said, I've been focusing on my studies. I got so much reading to do, it's ridiculous. I've got more reading. I think I've done more reading these last 2 years than I've done the last 20.
Well, of all the reading that you've been doing recently, what's the one kind of rereading where you've gone like, oh, okay, that was very interesting?
History. History of the global Christian church. And
nice.
And just it's showing, in a lot of ways we just keep repeating the same mistakes of the past, and we've got better living conditions, but the mistakes are still the same. And the other thing that I've become very aware of is that human beings need a hero. We need hero figures in our culture to act as sort of vicarious aspiratory characters that help us lose ourselves. And television takes away some of that we can lose ourselves in entertainment like that. But we always look for heroes, and then we discard them and find a new hero. And I mean, just think about a cookbook, for example. Why do we need another cookbook? Why would anyone sit down and go, you know what, I'm going to publish a cookbook? We don't. We've got enough cookbooks. We have enough cookbooks out there that we could be cooking amazing meals for the rest of our lives. We really don't need another cookbook. But that person is representative of a hero or an aspirational character that I can see them doing it and speaking to me, and I associate with them, and I want their cookbook. And it's all about who's the hero. We've just gone through 20 years of freaking superhero movies, and it's all about going, well, I'm going to take your hero and I'll up you a superhero. And it's we're escaping in a lot of ways into the world is getting so pressurized that we're escaping a little bit. And we need to escape. We need to have rest. Let me put it that way. We need rest. We may need an escape from time to time, but actually we need connection with people. We need connection with place, and we need connection really with something beyond ourselves, whether that's up or out. We need that connection. We need that relationship. We are relationship beings. And I find being cooped up sometimes, reading allows me to connect a little bit with history, or a little bit with the writer or the thinker, but ultimately, what are we going to do in our day-to-day is really interesting. One of the reasons for the big shift for me is exactly this, is exactly shifting to a place where it's more about relationships. out and up, and then how do we help guide a population in a good moral way to make wise decisions that ultimately reflect humanity. So, if that's what's distracting me at the moment, I guess. What's looming on the horizon, though, is a nice little trip to Oz, and to catch up with my mum, and to catch up with a few friends down there, and to have some daddy-daughter time, which is nice. It's just me and my daughter going. A lot of people going, "Oh, why isn't Lydia coming?" And my stock answer is, it's cheaper. But the real reason is it gives her a bit of a break, and she's saving up some of her annual leave for other adventures. So, yeah, it's I'm excited about tomorrow.
Yeah, good. Enjoy. All right. So the message I took away from that is choose your heroes wisely.
Absolutely. Yeah. From a political perspective, absolutely.
In all ways. In all ways, yeah.
Maybe not don't make him a hero. Make him a servant.
Yeah.
They should be.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right. We'll sign off. Thanks to everyone for listening. I really want to encourage you guys to come and have a listen next week. So my first climate courage for this season is going to be called The Fire Age. And through Brad Houck, firefighter Brad Houck, who you guys know, he's gonna join me. But so is Graham Tom, who's a retired senior leader in fire protection in Australia. And we're really going to talk about fire. We're going to talk about what's happened, obviously, in the Northern Hemisphere, but of course, what's coming up for Australia, funding, what we need to do, how we need to get prepared for it, but also how much more we need to do, because if we don't get fire under control, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So come and join me next Friday. I'm really excited about doing that. If either of you guys want to join, no, you won't, Tim, because you're very welcome. But I'm really excited to talk about that because I think it's a very important topic. But thanks for joining us, and see you in a couple of weeks.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye, all.
Bye.